Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode. Wherever in the world you're listening to us from, whatever platform you're listening to us on, I know I say it every episode, but I'll continue to say it. Thank you guys so much for the support, the questions, the messages, the reviews that you've left on the show. As always, I really, really appreciate that. And I really am glad that you guys are sticking with the show after all these years, and hopefully it's still providing you a really, really great content. And I'm really happy in particular to be bringing this episode because it's something that I see a lot of discussion about on social media and a lot of coaching circles that I'm in about trying to get our players to understand the why, the rationale behind the things that they do. And as coaches, making sure that we're communicating our message to players so that they understand really clearly why they're doing the things that they're doing. Because of course, as coaches, we know if our players understand the why, if they understand the rationale behind something, they become so much better players. They react quicker, they act quicker, and they just get into the game at a level that they wouldn't have previously. So that's what we're going to get into today, coaching players, helping our players understand the why behind the things that we do. And I think there's going to be a lot of really good stuff you all are going to be able to take from this. Of course, I don't do this alone. I am very happy to be joined by the head women's basketball coach at Nebraska Wesleyan University. Coach Bullock is joining us here today. Coach, appreciate you coming on and being able to carve out some time in the middle of a season to talk to us. How are things going?
You know, things are going well. We're steady trying to get better, just like everybody else in the country. And I think you can relate as a fellow basketball junkie. Anytime you have a chance to sit down, talk some hoops, get some opinions, and just have conversation, those are times you appreciate and value. And I'm looking forward to our talk.
Yeah, really appreciate that, Coach. And absolutely, as we kind of joked about before we started recording, it's like, a little tired right in the middle of everything. But then you have these conversations, it just re-energizes you, and you're like, all right, I'm ready to get right back into it, sort of thing. So, Coach, let's start with your basketball journey and your coaching journey. Where did the game of basketball take you, and how did it ultimately lead you to Nebraska Wesleyan?
Well, it's kind of a unique story. So, just like the most of us, basketball has been a part of my life since I can remember. There's actually pictures of me as a baby with a Fisher-Price basketball, courtesy of my grandfather. So, depending on how far back you want to go, it goes that far for me.
Born with a basketball in hand.
Yeah, literally. I know that's an expression thrown out there, but I have the proof. So. But for me as a basketball coach, my first taste of on the sidelines, I was the director of basketball operations for University of Nebraska Omaha, which is actually where I played as well. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't know what that job is, and I joke it's basically like an offensive lineman. And what I mean by that is you only get noticed when you screw up, right? Mm-hmm. Your quarterback takes a big hit, and so now everybody watching the game knows your name. What I was responsible for was all things logistics of travel, buses, team meals, hotels, plane tickets, you name it. So I was able to do that for 2 years, and that kind of got me my little taste of being on the sideline, even though it wasn't officially coaching. And then from there, I was able to venture off into the junior college level, where I was an assistant coach under head coach Todd Lawrenson. For 2 years at Southwestern Community College in the huge town, and I use that term loosely, of Creston, Iowa. I think the population at the time was about 7,000 people. And so I was able to kind of really get on the court and do some instruction and figure out kind of what I wanted my niche to be. And that was my first experience dealing with a little bit of a rebuild. They hadn't won many games prior to us getting there, and this is in no way a pat on my own back. It's 100% all Coach Lawrenson deserves all the credit. We were able to win 20 games both seasons. Wow. In my 2 years there, and then of course the third year, which would have been my third year, but I was presented an opportunity to return to UNO as a full-time assistant. that third year, of course, they get rid of me, and what do? They go win the national championship. And so
Wow.
I joke with Coach Lawrenson about that quite a bit, and he tries to give me the whole spiel. Oh, you had a big part of it, but in all seriousness, no animosity. Obviously, you want to see those guys succeed, and the fact that I had relationships with some of them prior to, I was happy for them, and obviously want Coach Lowe to have all the success in the world. So from there, I went on, like I said, to coach at UNO for 4 years. We were in the Summit League. We made it to the conference championship twice. Unfortunately, went 0-2. Those darn Dakota schools out there, South
Yeah.
Dakota State, North Dakota State.
Tough.
Yeah, they're tough, and we had some good teams, and we had some all league players. Just a couple possessions short, and just kind of how the ball bounces. And then once that kind of ran its course, and you get it, coaches change all the time. I wasn't really sure what I was going to do, and lo and behold, my phone rings, and I'll be honest, when I get numbers, just like I'm assuming most of us that we don't have, you just kind of assume it's going to be spam, or you let it go to voicemail, right? I answered it, and it was the athletic director here at Nebraska Wesleyan asking me if I would be interested. I go through the interview process, and long story short, here I am. And I'm sure we'll talk about it here in a little bit, but man, what a whirlwind that was. Getting that call would have been early September. School starts late August. So you can imagine how that transition was, and what these girls were going through, going that month or month and a half without a coach. So just trying to leave this place a little bit better than I found it. And I don't know when that is. Obviously, I'm not, I don't have one foot out the door or anything like that, but just trying to be better than we were yesterday, kind of like we talked about in the pregame show.
Let me ask you, because this is such a unique situation that you found yourself in. Talk about how you stepped into that position and kind of took that role of leadership, where you took the girls and said, "Hey, I'm the guy. Trust me. I know I just stepped in here, but follow me. We're gonna do something here." How did you get that buy-in where they looked at you and said, "All right, this is the guy who's here, and we're gonna go all in on what he's coaching and trying to tell us."
Yeah, and honestly, that's a question for my team because all I could do was believe in what I was telling them, and genuinely have their best interest at heart, and hope that that is relayed in the message that I'm trying to deliver. I can remember meeting our group the first time, and knowing what I know about the history, and it's been down for a little bit, and just the eye contact that I was able to generate on that first meeting was something that surprised me, but pleasantly surprised me. And so, if the group that you're speaking to believes that you believe, that's the first step. And whether it's true or not, obviously you hope it is, but you need to convince them that you are confident in the message you're delivering. Otherwise, they won't be. And so, as I was able to meet with them the first a couple of times, just being consistent, and really trying to express a genuine interest in improving the women's basketball program here at Wesleyan. I think they were able to kind of sense that. And last year had its ups and downs, and even early this year, a little bit of the same. But the only thing we can control is the work that we put in, and the attitude that we bring, and we try to make sure that those two things check out every single day.
And I think what I get from that is even when you step into a position like that you may be kind of thrown into, or maybe kind of last second, like, you have to have confidence in yourself as a coach, and what you're doing and what you believe in and what you stand for as a coach, because as you know, you only get one chance to make that, first impression on them, and
Right.
you got to step into that room believing in yourself that you're the guy for that job. And it sounds like, that sincerity is something that it seems like your players caught on to, and you yourself, like, believe that, hey, this is where I'm at. This is something I believe in being here and want to be here. And like you said, that's the best you can do, and then hope that the buy-in comes from there.
Yeah, and honestly, as long as you're consistent, and you're really trying to, improve, the rest of it will kind of take care of itself. I'm not a huge fake it till you make it. Obviously, you don't want to go the other way either. But if you can convince yourself, well, that's the biggest buy-in that you could possibly get.
Yeah.
And once you have that, you hope it's contagious, and then you just need one, and then you
Yeah.
need two, and you need three, and hopefully it's a snowball effect, and you're no longer talking about buy-in. We're talking the fun stuff, the X's and O's,
Yeah.
the execution, and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Coach, I know one of the things that you also are passionate about is about film and the concept of reviewing film and learning from film. So let me give you a platform here to kind of talk about um what goes into your film sessions. How do they kind of look and operate, and how do you kind of help your players become students of film and learn from what's going on in a film session?
Well, I think the biggest thing about film review is referencing film review, right? And so when things don't go well, or you're doing a drill in practice and it's not going well, just simply saying, well, we'll review that later. And it's not something that I'll get to it when I get to it. It's in the most literal of senses, we will watch this together later. And so then now we can have this open dialect, and just talk to one another and just have an open conversation about the things going through their head in any given moment. I think, coaches get caught in my way or the highway, and I think that's dangerous, because in the moment, yeah, you may feel like you're right, and then you go back and watch film and you realize, well, she was sagging way off, so what we were trying to initially do probably wouldn't have worked, and that's why XYZ happened. So, for me, just referencing the film review is a big one, because we all know the cliche, film doesn't lie, right? And it's gonna show us exactly what happened, and give us an opportunity to kind of explain where our minds were going in any given moment. And I think that's huge. And as far as how much film one watches, I think as a coach, as an assistant coach, and now as a head coach, I will admit I watch way too much film.
Film
I
junkie.
just do. I just do. And because I'm always searching for answers, and I am well aware that I don't know everything. And I always have questions, and, well, what happens if this, and what happens in that? So I have to be careful not to overdo it. Um, for example, if I'm watching a team that we play on Saturday, and we're probably 6 to 8 games into the season, well, I'm going to watch every single offensive possession. So if you run something that's not on there, you put it in between your last game and our game, and that's the only excuse I can give myself for not being prepared. Now, I can't do that with the team. I can't lay every single thing out for our group.
Hmm.
You have to pick your 2 to 3 actions that you'll see the most, hope that you can cover that up enough, and then that's when the game is on. I think, as a coach, you want to be able to stop everything and shut everything down. Well, I don't know about you, but I've never seen anybody pitch a shutout, right? And so that's not exactly what we're trying to do. We're just trying to make things difficult. And so understanding that, and understanding what we're trying to do and how it pertains to what they are trying to do,
Hmm.
it's important that we don't lose sight of that, because at the end of the day, the play is going to break down. Things are going to go awry, or the ball is going to bounce a certain way, and at that point, it is playground, schoolyard, siblings, in the purest of forms. Can you guard the bounce, and can you play team defense regardless of the action, and then rebound it? And hopefully you can do that enough to win some games.
Yeah, it's so funny to hear you kind of talk about that film, because I love film myself. Like I love looking at film, and I'm rewind, fast forward, rewind. Like I'm all about that. But I also know that my players can't handle in all of that, nor do they need all of that. And so I
Sure.
know that the challenge has always been for me is like I got to figure out what from this film do my players actually need to know? Like, what is it that they need? Like, if I'm going to just look at film on myself, how do I like make sure that I'm giving them the stuff that they need, or talking about whatever points it is that they need, and not just overwhelming them with a bunch of information? Because I remember I tried doing that once and trying to give them all this heavy detail and all these things, and I saw their eyes glaze over. They looked at me
Yeah.
like, "What in the world?"
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so, it's hard. I would love to, control, micromanage everything and be like, I see it all and I can manage every single thing that's happening because I did all this homework and all this studying. But,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think it's really, really cool though. Like you mentioned though, like you look at film to the point where like if they're going to do something new that surprises you, it's because they installed it in the last like 2, 3 days.
Right.
It's like, all right. you know.
Right. And at that point, you tip your hat and hope that you instill the principles that,
You can
jumping to
adjust
the
to it.
ball
Uh-huh.
or applying ball pressure or being in help that can at least minimize how much of a scramble is generated by the action. And then from there, again, it's just about energy, effort, 5 to the defensive glass, finish possessions, and let's go the other way.
Hmm. As we move into the topic of coaching players to help understand the why, I'm curious because you're at the university level, so I actually wanted to start with this first. When players come to you, and I know that every player is different, but so I'm going to speak and I'm going to ask this in like general terms. Do players come into you having been system players that run, specific rigid sets and don't maybe necessarily have the full understanding, they're just kind of plugged into a system and do their operations? Or do players come to you with that kind of more instinctual knowledge of kind of understanding things at a conceptual level and being able to know the rationale behind what's happening? And in general terms, what would you say your assessment is of players in your program?
Wow, what a great question. I'd say there's a mixture of both. I would say the majority were more system players and they were doing what they were told and didn't necessarily understand the why, which then, as you just alluded to, kind of results in not understanding concepts as well as we would love them to at the next level. That being said, my point guard here, her dad was a high school basketball coach. And so the conversations that I'm able to have with her are a little bit different because she grew up in a gym. And we all know how coaches' kids typically are, can shoot the ball, understand the game a little bit different, understand the details and counters and things like that. So I think for us, what we get a lot of, and I use this term out of love and endearment, and my team, if they ever listen to this, will know, we have a lot of robots sometimes, right? Right. And yeah, well, coach, you said to set the screen here. Well, yeah, but I didn't realize that she wasn't going to be there, and so the impromptu isn't always there to the level in which we would love it to be. But then again, you hope that through practice and repetition, you can just instill a plan B or a plan C on based on the defense and how they're being guarded. So that's it's a little bit of a combo, but again, it's fun because of the different backgrounds, and then you get to mold them into a way that is more beneficial for your program. And so
Mhm.
sometimes no habits are better than bad habits. And honestly, I'd
Yeah.
probably go a little bit further to say usually, right? Because then you're not undoing anything, you're more just teaching. And so that's kind of what we run into quite a bit here. And there are things that I have taken for granted over my playing and coaching career that have been brought to light here that honestly has made me a better coach and a better communicator. So I'm actually grateful for that opportunity.
And I think for like high school coaches and those coaches who are working kind of at the younger levels, if they have the ability, which fingers crossed they do, if they have the ability to effectively, teach the why and really teach the game at a level where players can understand what's happening, understand counters to what's happening, this, that, or the other. If they're doing that the right way, that's such a great way for coaches to, help those players kind of separate themselves from maybe other players who are looking to play at the next level by just having that instinctual knowledge. And I think by building that, I think that kind of stuff shows up on, recruiting film or shows up on game film. You can kind of probably pick out those players who just sort of have a nose for the ball or just kind of know and can make those reads almost like on instinct because they understand the game at that level. And I think that's a big service that I think we as high school coaches can really work on doing. Is obviously we have our systems and our facets and our things that we love to run, but anything that we can do to actually accurately, effectively teach players um why behind things and help them build those basketball instincts, I feel like is a big separator for the next level.
High school coaches and youth coaches and AAU coaches and on down the line is something that is a job that should not be taken for granted. I mean, I get it. As competitors, we want to win and we want to win often, but especially early on, you have kids out here. I call it the Steph Curry effect. They walk in the gym and they're shooting 40 footers, and they're shooting from their ankles, and because they don't have the strength to have the
No.
form that they need.
Give
And
me
so
nightmares, coach.
so I can only imagine. And those are just things that, you hope at the youth level and high school level or junior college level or whatever level it is before they get to you, that it's at least been mentioned, instilled and drilled would be great. But it's just one of those things where we often lose sight of the main thing. And not to quote Jalen Hurts, because I am a Kansas City Chiefs fan, but you got to keep the main thing the main thing. And if winning games at the third grade level is the main thing, I think we need to have a conversation, because there are much bigger fish to fry.
Yeah. I have purposely stopped going to a lot of youth basketball events because I don't think my blood pressure, I don't think my doctor would be annoyed at me at my blood pressure rates going to those. But no, I agree. I mean, those 8U trophies, I'm sure really nice looking, but just this teaching the basketball, right? I mean, if we
Right.
all do our part in teaching it, I give all the credit in the world to, youth coaches who are going about doing it the right way, those who can work with, 5, 6, 7, 8 year olds and really build those like solid fundamental habits. Like I owe them such a debt of gratitude because by the time they come to me, it's like, oh my goodness, you had really good coaches and like
Mm-hmm.
look what we can do.
Right.
I mean, shout out to all of them who are doing it the right way and not worried about their win-loss record at
Sure.
that sort of
Right.
level. So
Exactly.
for sure. Okay, so these players come in, right? All right, they're robots, a lot of them, as you mentioned, lovingly, robots. So what goes into it now, because not only are you kind of helping them understand the why behind things, but now they're playing basketball at a much faster level, at a much more competitive level than maybe they're used to. So in a way the game maybe looks completely different than how it even did in high school. So how are you communicating that message? How are you kind of teaching your players as you go to understand the why and the rationale behind the things that are happening on the court?
Well, I think the most important thing when doing that is to make sure your message is clear. First and foremost, obviously, if you're just rambling a bunch of words, which I have a tendency to do at times, so I apologize in advance if that happens here on the podcast. But I think the important thing is to be clear and to be consistent. If you're saying the same things over and over, as much as that could be irritating as a coach, not many people can learn any skill set just from hearing it or seeing it just one time. So, the repetition and the reps that we get in practice are just that much more valuable, as long as we are striving towards the same goal. Now, if you're sitting here saying we're forcing baseline on Monday, and then you come out Wednesday and you decide to force middle and no explanation, well, that's going to cause some disconnect, right? And so now they're not going to understand the why, or why do I need to be in help here if we're forcing there, and or whatever the situation may be. So I think for us, having that clear message is important, and then also being as transparent as possible. And I think we've all had different levels of transparency with different players, and some can handle the criticism a little bit better than others. But one thing that my players are probably tired of hearing me say is, honesty without trust is dangerous, right? And so if you understand that I am giving you these critiques and trying to help you and mold you into this player because I have your best interest, which then in return is our best interest, and you trust that, then we're okay. But if you don't believe that I have your best interest, well, that pretty much speaks for itself why you'd be reluctant to do anything that I'm trying to help you do. So honesty without trust, that's well, it's dangerous,
Yeah.
right? And I want to make sure that our players understand that. And I think because of that message and them believing that, us as coaching staff, we do have their best interest at heart, I think that can help receive the message a little bit better.
With like what you said, what it kind of makes me reflect on is I remember in kind of especially my real young days coaching, and I'm sure a lot of people listening have probably gone through this. Maybe you have as well, coaches, where you say something or you talk about something, but then you don't like repeatedly emphasize it because you like
Mhm.
think they already got it. It's like,
Right.
oh, I already told you that once or twice, but it's like, no, no, no. You can't just say something once or twice and just be like, oh, I think it's permanently installed in them, right?
Right.
Like you mentioned, right? That repetition of things, and I think that and I'll let you speak a little bit more on this. I think as coaches, sometimes I know I get this way where we want to try and get like everything and we want to throw everything at them that we possibly can, but maybe it's sometimes beneficial to just give them a little bit less, but really make it so that they really truly understand those few things before we try and
Sure.
add, 15, 20 other things on their plate. I don't know what you're kind of you're at the university level, so maybe a little bit different, but that's kind of how, at least for me, my philosophy has kind of always had to be like, let's make sure we understand a few of these things really well before I try to add like a lot more to you.
No, and you're spot on there. And especially, this is my first stint, both on the women's side and at the Division 3 level. And the time that you have just is not the same to what I'm used to.
Yeah.
We start practice October 15th. And before that, well, new to this year, we had 8 days we could play with and just kind of do some things before that date. But my first year here as interim, October 15th was the first day we could practice. And so you don't have the 6 to 8 week individual period that I was used to at UNO, or the opportunity to have a side gym that's just as good as your main gym that you can always get into, things like that, where facilities are of the essence. And so there are just a bunch of different factors that can kind of go into it. So to your point, you really need to pick, what are we going to stand on, and make kind of our pillars, or, the conversation I had with our staff today was, what are our non-negotiables?
I like that
What are
term a
we
lot. Yeah.
going to, walk off the bus, walk into the locker room, walk into the building, and know that we are going to have XYZ no matter what. And so I think it's important to have those and define those, and it can make that transition a little bit easier as well.
Yeah, and I of course, as coaches, right? It's really hard because then we might get, have our players, get beat on something that we didn't really emphasize a lot, and it's like, like we should have covered
Yeah,
that, but it's like,
right.
no, like, yeah, in a way, you never want to use the term, right? Let it go, but it's like, but if we didn't cover it, if we
Mhm.
didn't go over it in depth enough, and they make a mistake on it, you almost kind of have to, bite your lip and say, well, but they did do the things that we really emphasized. They did those well, and it's like, if
Right.
that's what they did, but it's that give and take, and I think as a coach, right, you have to figure out what those things are, and it sounds like for you that that's something you've done a lot of reflection on, is figure out what are those like key non-negotiables. And if you wouldn't mind, what are a couple of those key non-negotiables you do have as a program that you're like, whatever it is, we're going to make sure we absolutely do these things? What are those for your program?
Yeah, and I think for us, it's about, what can we do that doesn't necessarily, that you don't necessarily have to be a good basketball player to do. And I'm not saying that to be a knock on our group. It's just a matter of, you're going to have different levels of talent on any team, right? And so
Sure.
for us, communication is key. It's so important for us. It covers up a lot of mistakes that we're going to make, because we all know basketball is organized chaos. And today, for the first time in practice, actually, I did shell drill with our defense, and I took talking completely out of it. Just, you cannot say a single word. And we went through shell, and it was one of the most awkward and eerie things I've been a part of as a basketball coach. But it proved a point of how important and necessary communication is, right? And so sometimes you have to think outside the box a little bit, and that was one today for us that was beneficial. And our level of communication was much higher after that. So communication is non-negotiable. And then, energy and effort. you know uh, if you fly around, and you're going to make mistakes anyway, and you
Sure.
might as well make them flying around. And that way we can make people uncomfortable, and we can disrupt some timing, and maybe we can run through a passing lane, or whatever the case may be. But those are some things that for us, we need to have those no matter what. Now, if you want to put an emphasis on shooting, good luck. I mean, shooting is hard, right? The best 3-point shooter ever, which most of us would agree, is Steph Curry. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what his exact percentage is, but I'm gonna guess it's between 40 and 50%. That's high end, right? And so just based on math, that means he's missing half of his shots. So shooting is hard. And so, people are going to be able to shoot at different levels. And that's a hard non-negotiable, because now if you're not shooting, well, now you can't play. Right. And so we try to make those things, those non-negotiables, things we can control regardless of skill level. Being a good teammate, one of the things that I really harp on is, if we're going to dive on the floor and we're going to sacrifice our body, the least you could do is run over here and help me up. Right.
I just talked about that like a week ago. That's so funny. We just talked about that as a team, my team. Go ahead.
No, and it seems like such a little thing, but I had a girl dive on the floor the other day, and nobody helped her up. And so what did we do? We stopped practice. We talked about it. I asked her very nicely, "Hey, will you go lay back down for me?" And she did. I blew the whistle, and everybody went over there and helped her up. And it seems like such a a cliche or cheesy thing to do, but that stuff's important. If you're really trying to build this togetherness and this team camaraderie and establish a culture, those things are important. It was to the point where one time, it's funny because a couple of weeks ago, somebody dove on the floor and the other team ran over and helped her up. I'm like, okay,
yeah.
okay, all right. I mean,
somebody's helping somebody.
That's an adjustment. I can appreciate it. We are in practice. We are on the same team, but just for future reference, we want to help ours up.
Yeah. Look for our jersey. Cool. Look for our color.
Right. Just like when we're passing, don't throw it to the other jersey color. Right.
That's so funny.
But it was cool to see because it was something on their mind, and we put an emphasis on it, and they responded. So those are just some things that for us has nothing to do with makes, misses, or wins and losses. Let's just do these things no matter what, and give ourselves the best chance at being successful.
That's great. Talk a little bit about on the offensive side. What is your offensive philosophy, and how do you kind of communicate to your team the why behind what you're running on offense and what you're looking for on the offensive end?
Great question. Another one. So for us this year, we're doing a lot more of movement, and a lot of people are doing the 5-out stuff, and we are doing it as well in some degree. Understanding the why, as far as why we're doing that, sometimes it's simple, right? We're not trying to reinvent the wheel here, right? There's very few completely new offenses or ideas that haven't been done in some capacity. Now there are obviously ways to improve, right? I don't want to make it sound like nothing will ever be invented or anything like that, but at the end of the day, dribble, pass, and shoot, right? And so and cut. I guess I should say that one too, as we're playing 5-out. And so as our players understand, it's hard to guard 2 and 3 and 4 sides. It is. And so that's part of it. Having to guard it ourselves is one of the biggest, teachers, because as you break down, well, guess what? Other teams are going to break down too. So now it's up to us to understand, what opportunities are we creating, and have our eyes up in the anticipation to take advantage of those. And that for us has been one of, if not the biggest, learning curve as we try to move into this more 5-out fluid read and react type of offense.
Yeah, and I imagine with what you talked about with some of the players that come into your system, the freedom and the choice that's involved in a 5-out system might be something that a lot of your players just never really had before, and it might be something completely new to them to have that much like decision making or kind of like freedom to make a decision at their disposal. Might be really foreign to them.
Yeah, and you're right, and that is a luxury that we have at this level, although you alluded to earlier that it happens a little bit at the high school level with the transfers and the recruiting and stuff like that. But we are able to kind of go out and handpick players that either have done it or show a skill set that fits in there, or having conversations with high school coaches, AAU coaches. Oh yeah, they understand movement, or they understand spacing, and she does a really good job with XYZ, which then directly translates to what we're trying to do. So they maybe never have done exactly what we're trying to do, but it is relatable in the sense of pass, cut, fill, or pass and screen away, or here's a ball screen, so we're coming off to attack, understanding that if the help side from the strong side is there, well, throwback's probably available, or things like that sometimes they don't even know that they know. You just have to kind of word it a little bit differently so it clicks for them. And those light bulb moments make coaching fun.
Yeah, I've been there before where like they understand something, but they didn't understand like the terminology
Yeah,
where it's like,
right.
well, oh, you mean this? I'm like, I don't know what that means, but yes, you may use a different term for it, but yes, that's what I'm like something that I'm referring to. What about defensively? What do you like to do on defense, and where would you say that they're at defensively? Is it kind of the same thing where players come in kind of in that robotic system? Is defense more something that they kind of pick up on, or what are your kind of thoughts on that first off?
Defensively is so much more energy and effort that we really try to harp on that because we think it'll cover up a lot of other things that you may not know tactfully or strategically. I think for us, for instance, we want to force baseline more so than middle because that 45 pass or that baseline pass is hard for players to make at our level. And so we see that wraparound pass either go out of bounds or especially if it's with their offhand, not quite strong enough or confident enough to make that pass. So now we put less pressure on our defense and we are scrambling less, hopefully.
Mm.
Obviously, you get somebody who's really good at going baseline and can kind of Steve Nash that dribble and keep the dribble alive and kind of pick us apart a little bit, at which point now we have to, kind of switch our focus and say, okay, yeah, we're forcing that way, but at some point we have to draw our line in the sand and not let them go all the way through and cause our defense to just kind of being like, where's Waldo, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
We want to
yeah,
make sure
yeah.
we want to stay as organized and out of scramble situations as possible. So, for us, just right there talking about staying out of or what how we word it is staying on script. And if we can stay on script for longer and just basically communicate our way through it, that gives us a better chance at finishing possessions the way we want to, as opposed to just kind of running out there and having reckless abandon and just kind of hoping they miss. We don't want to hope teams miss. We want to make them miss, and that's a huge difference for us.
Yeah, yeah. I like that a lot. I don't want to have a defensive strategy that involves on like, all right, let's just hope they make a mistake. I'd rather
Yeah,
force them to make a mistake or force them into that mistake than, just hope and pray sort of thing. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah. And it's it to me like defense has always been kind of interesting to me to see teams, and this isn't knocking anyone in particular, but you see a lot of zone. I know I see a lot of
Sure.
zone. I'm sure you do too, but it's
Hmm.
always interesting to see teams out there who have a zone, but the players themselves don't really have strong like man-to-man principles.
Right.
Because to me, I don't understand how you can run a zone unless you
Mhm.
understand man-to-man conceptually that well. So I
Exactly.
know for me, like understanding, even if we do in a zone, understanding like how to be in man and when what we're trying to look at and how to run a man-to-man defense effectively is super crucial to me so that I can't even feel comfortable personally as a coach going into a zone unless I feel like my players understand the why behind what they're supposed to be doing in help or all those other man-to-man concepts.
Yeah, and honestly, that's an adjustment for me mentally as a coach because our league is pretty good. The ARC is one of the top Division III conferences in the country, and I don't think that's me being biased. I think that's me being honest. And so you have to kind of pick your poison a little bit. And so if you go zone, you have a bunch of girls on the opposing team that can really light it up and shoot it. That being said, um, positionally, we can help ourselves by going zone and try to keep bodies on bodies and people in the right areas and things like that by going zone. But then, as I just alluded to, you're kind of writing your own, you know, will there or whatever you want to call it because we're allowing a team to do kind of what they're really good at and maybe not so good off the bounce. But then, if you're out of position and we use lane one, lane two, lane three, and that's something that my old college coach kind of used quite a bit. So I do the same thing. And lane one is where the ball is in. So if the ball is on the right wing, that's lane one. And so then the middle lane is lane two, and we shouldn't have anybody in lane three because I've never seen a single person score without having the ball in their hands, right? At some point. And we get
Yeah.
so worried about these really good shooters, and they are, but I don't care how good of a shooter you are. you can't make a three without the ball. So, we're trying to gravitate towards and be off to and help, because we tend to find ourselves worrying about the what if and the maybe or may not happen. And then we forget about the drive that's happening right now. And that's the one we give up. So trying to stay in the moment defensively as much as we can. Obviously, we don't want to get caught ball watching either. But those are just some things that, we really try to harp on defensively, and something that we continue to get better at and work on every day.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. And I want to kind of take this now. We kind of talked a little bit about the things you want to run on offense and defense, but let me ask you about also just practices in general. What is you as a coach, your rationale behind your practice plans, and what is your why behind the practices that you organize? And also with that, how do you help communicate that to your players so they understand the why behind what they're doing in practice and why it's important to be working on it?
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with film review, kind of the topic we talked about
Yep.
earlier. I think once we see mistakes that we've made or things we do well and why they worked for us, it's important to understand that, film has this notion of always being negative sometimes, right? Well, good things happen on film too. And so it's important that we don't harp on the negative, because you don't want to be that coach. You also want to give some praise too, even though teaching often comes in forms of criticism and critique. But understanding, why we do the things we do is so much more important, because then we'll continue to do them. And so, in film review, that's a big part of it. So that now, I'll just use the baseline drive as an example again. If we give up middle and our help side tall decides to help up the floor, which we try to preach, we want to help over, never up. But if we do help up because of that middle drive and they give up a layup, well, that's why we don't want it to go middle, and so those type of things are important, as far as what we do in practice. And I think another way that we do that is then we try to replicate exactly the situation that we were in. If we're down by 4 with 3 minutes to go, and you come down and shoot a pull up three with 26 on the shot clock, probably not the best shot we could get. Right. So now we watch that on film, we talk about it, because now possessions are that much more important, which they all are, but some just feel a little bit different because of time and score and all those different factors that go into it. Well, now we're going to replicate that in practice, and we're going to talk about the decision that we should make and that gives us the best chance to be successful. So I think game like situations is another thing that goes into why we do the things that we do in practice. And then another thing is we have to be willing to compete. I mean, we talk about energy and effort. And I've seen coaches. I've been to high school practices or watching those coaching clinics, and they're doing a bunch of drills. And how many times have we seen a player be really good in a drill, and then the live action comes and it's deer in the headlights. And so
Yeah,
we
been there.
we try to, and you're still going to run into some of that, especially with younger players. We have some freshmen on the team now that are still getting acclimated to the differences between our level and the high school level in which they came from. So you're still going to run into that, but it sure feels good as a coach to sit down in a huddle in a game down by 2 with 6 minutes to go, and you can give them the line, hey, remember in practice when we did exactly this? And so then
Yeah,
you can
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
put them at ease, and there's this sense of confidence. And it's like, sometimes we get caught up in trying to draw up the perfect play when we really just need to stick to what we do and make sure that everybody's confident in whatever that is, because we've been here before. And so that's a big one for me. I think we need to play as much as possible. I think that gets lost in the art of practice. Is sometimes we just do a bunch of drills and think that that's really getting the message across. But I think repetition of game like situations is huge.
Uh, it's actually really funny you mentioned that, because I know we just kind of did a lot of adjustment to our practice plans about putting a lot more emphasis this year on like game situations, because I
Yeah.
think we found that in drills they understand these things in isolation, but they need to be put in these situations to actually see that direct translation into a game, or like see something that happened in a game and put them back into that situation in a practice and be like, okay, you're in this exact same
Mhm.
situation. Now what? Because you're going
Right.
to be in this situation later in a game, right? So I think it's one of those really interesting things for players, and I think that they probably get it more. It probably clicks with them more when they see like, oh, this situation my coach is putting me in is this one I just was in a game, or like you mentioned, right? We're in a huddle. Oh, remember we just worked over this in practice. Oh, that's why we did this in practice. Because look where we are in a game right now, and so like I love my drills as well, and I think I may have fallen in love. And I don't know if you've been in this situation before. I've talked to other guests who have, where they get these drills and they run really well and they look really good. They look really neat. So like I remember I felt like I was a really good coach because these drills were being run really well. But like I don't know if my players were really learning a whole lot. They were just doing a drill really well,
Yeah.
and then I got exposed, I think, in a game situation.
Well, and it just goes to show, the drills. Well, 'cause what's going to happen in a drill? They're going to start cheating the drill, and if it's a continuous action drill, if they cheat it, then they're going to be in position. And in a game, instead of just doing the drill, they're gonna see you jump it, and they're gonna flare it, right? And so we have to be able to adjust on the fly and
Mhm.
still be able to lock in and play with the pace that we want to play with. So I'm not saying, and obviously there's a time and place for drills. I do drills, most days, but I would love to talk about a concept, let's say ball screen coverage, and then now let's go play. And hey, gold team or black team, let's make sure we set a bunch of ball screens so then we can now apply what we just drilled for 10-15 minutes and make sure it's stuck. Otherwise, we need to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, and to add to that, because I 100% agree, I think when you put your players in those situations, as a coach, you learn about like the why behind why your players are doing the things that they're doing. I think like we can fall in love in terms of like drills where it's very like scripted, but your players aren't making really decisions. You don't really get to see your players thinking, whereas you put them in these competitive situations or put them in these, specific situations where they have to think and they have to make a decision on their own. I think as a coach, you get to see what their thought process is and why they made the decision they did. And I know for me, that sort of information is like invaluable to almost like be able to get into my players' heads.
Yeah, no, you're spot on there. And just like anything else, the more you do something, the more comfortable you are, the higher the chances you have of being successful. So we're just trying to take the guesswork out of it, have something to fall back on. It's pretty cool because it's happened a couple of different times now to be able to say that in a huddle and then just watch the smiles come across their faces because it's like, oh yeah, you're right. We can do this, and sometimes, as confident as you hope players are, and even us as coaches, that reassurance and that those affirmations are huge, and it can go a long ways down the stretch.
Yeah, and so many to that point of what you said, right? There's so many unique situations
Right.
that happen in a game, and I think that as coaches, the more that we could like get our players in those situations where they don't seem completely foreign in a game, where they've already had experience in it in a practice setting at least,
Right.
like where we're doing them a really good favor. So I know I really like that a lot. Um, as we kind of wind down here a little bit, I want to make sure I asked you about your why. Like as coaches, we're always have to reflect on our own why. And so I wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of talk about what you personally do in terms of self-reflection and kind of think about the why behind why you coach, why you make the decisions that you do. What goes into that personal self-reflection process?
Sure. The non-serious answer to the why I coach that I give, and I use it joking because it is work, but it beats working every day, right?
Hey, there you
Right?
go.
Because the old cliche is not work if you love what you do, and
Uh-huh.
I feel very fortunate to still be in this business and around the game that has done so much for me. So um but to give a more serious answer, the why I coach, I say it all the time. I want to turn as many of my personal I wish I would have into as many I'm glad I did for the players that I come across. And that is not a basketball specific, that is being a college student, right? Because you look back, oh man, I wish I would have been in the gym more. I wish I would have studied a little bit harder. I wish I wouldn't have taken this for granted. Those are things that, as I look back, I want to make sure that everybody on our team appreciates the opportunity that they have, because it's some crazy number. Under 10% of high school athletes get a chance to move on and play at the collegiate level, and it may be even closer to under 5 and under 7%.
Yeah, it's a real low, real low number.
Depending on what level we're talking about
Sure.
here. And so anywhere from NAIA Division 3 to 1, junior college even, it's something that you shouldn't take for granted. So I make sure that we don't lose sight of that. And for me, understanding why we do things schematically, a lot of times it's answered by personnel, right? And so if we have a bunch of 5'4" water bugs that can just, change the pace and play, well, that's why we play fast, right? But if you have a 6'2", 6'3", 6'4" true post that's really good around the basket, well, that's why we play 4-on-1 in and try to get it into her, because she's really good with her back to the basket. And so things like that, I try not to take myself too seriously, because again, if it's my way or the highway and I don't have the personnel for it, well, that's a recipe for disaster, right? And so, as I look back and why we do certain things, a lot of those questions are answered due to the personnel that we have, and maybe more even so, what am I confident in my ability to teach? Because as we talked about in the very beginning, if I don't believe it, I can't expect them to. I don't know the ins and outs of the Princeton style offense, but there are some concepts within the Princeton style offense that I can teach and understand. But if you're going to sit here and just say, hey, this team needs to run that, and I've never done it, man,
It'd be tough.
Coaching's hard enough,
Yeah.
with what you deem yourself as an expert, let alone something you're foreign to. So I think a lot of those X's and O's are answered personnel wise. But going back to the why do I coach? I know how important the coaches in my life have been, and how influential they have been to the person that I am now. And sometimes, whether it be a parental figure or an older sibling figure, or whatever depending on how the age difference between you and your players are, I think being that outlet and giving them that relationship, or having that relationship with them, is important, because you just never know what anybody's going through, and everybody's going through something. And I know for me, looking back, especially early on, I was fortunate to be taught some of those things that we just talked about, that we wish more kids had learned before they get to you. And so I know how impactful that was, because it's now allowed me to stay in coaching and be around the game that I love. And I hope to be able to do that for others.
So let me ask, before we hit our concluding segment, have there been things that you had as either part of your coaching philosophy, or things that you did as a coach, where after self-reflection you realized maybe like didn't align with your why, or didn't really align with what you believed in, or if those things kind of always stayed consistent throughout your coaching career?
I think anytime that you are thrown into a new situation, it causes for a whole different self-reflection segment, so to speak, right? And so for me, I never considered coaching women's basketball, and that is not a knock. I have worked with girls before, whether it be like at a satellite camp way back when, or at little kids camp when I would work them as a player, or even as a dobo for UNO. So I have experience with girls, but I just never thought about coaching on the women's side. And so I have this idea, oh, when I'm a head coach, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be great at XYZ, and well, all those things were aligned with 6'4" and above length, athletic, impromptu on the men's side. Well, and so here I am on the women's side, where length is obviously different, and the freestyle or the read and react isn't quite as present as it is on the men's side. And so there's a lot more teaching, and I had to kind of flip and switch what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And as I talked about before, we kind of do the 5-out things because that allows us to, as long as we're moving and understand some rules and concepts that we have, allows us to create opportunities without doing a whole bunch of individual one-on-one ball handling, coming off a ball screen, make decisions, which we have some that can do, but not majority. So now we can play a bunch of different lineups and not have to worry about having a 1 and a 2 and a 3. We can just be out there and understand what we're trying to accomplish, and that's been an adjustment, and I think it's been going well, and we're continuing to learn, of course. But yeah, so I mean, anytime that you're thrown into a new situation, it's important that you're not set in your ways, because there may be something, believe it or not, that you didn't think of early on, and actually works out better for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's it's crazy. I've coached on the women's side for about 10 years now. So I'm trying to imagine myself like going to the men's side and just imagine how much of like what I would do would just have to change. Like I give you a lot of credit because that is such a shift in terms of like personnel and what you're thinking about, that you really do have to do a lot of reflection. I imagine you had to when you thought about that shift about going to the women's side, about like, why do I want to go to the women's side? Like, what is that going to look like? How does that align with what I still want to do as like a basketball coach and a basketball mind? I imagine like you had to really, really do a lot of thinking about that beforehand or after you took the job.
Yeah, and it's definitely different, and it's been a learning curve, and I'm still
Mhm.
learning. I'm not going to sit here and even lie to you and tell you that I have it all figured out. I hope I learn something tomorrow and the day after. And I think anytime that you think you know it all, it's time to find something else. So I'm steadily, constantly trying to learn, and also, a lot of that is from our players. Because I say it jokingly, but it's true. I mean, all my players have been on the women's or the girls' basketball side longer than I have,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah, you're
so
absolutely right. Yeah.
they can offer a different perspective, and again, in no way am I sitting here thinking I know it all. I think that's a real dangerous a mindset or approach to anything.
Hmm.
And so it's a joint effort, and it's something that we're steady trying to improve. And that open dialect and that communication that we talked about earlier, you hope that you've generated this foundation and trust to where you can have these conversations and try to figure out what's best for the group.
Yeah. Awesome. To wrap up, Coach, there's a couple questions I ask every guest. So I'm going to go ahead and start with this first one, which is thinking back on your coaching career. What is a specific moment that you went through as a coach that you think our listeners would be able to learn from?
Man, where do I start? um, I think of all the things that came to my mind when you asked that question, can be addressed with a simple, don't take yourself too seriously. I think for me, and especially in my younger coaching days, I wanted to be perfect, and I wanted to cover everything, and I wanted my team to know how good I was at XYZ, and none of that stuff is important. It's just, I mean, yeah, you want to put your best foot forward, and you want to have pride, because anything you put your name on, you want to make sure is the best it can be. But understanding that, sports are just imperfect. It's chaos. It is something that, you could prepare your what off, and then they come out and do something completely different, and now what? And so understanding that things are going to happen, you're going to overthink, more than you're willing to admit,
Mm,
myself included. And so just understanding to roll with it a little bit, stay in the moment, understand, for me as a basketball coach, I am very blessed and fortunate to be able to do this for a career. And it's something that I've, wanted to do for a very long time. So, but whatever your field is, just understand that, you have your support system, you have people that love you, try to keep perspective and all those things. Cause at the end of the day, you're gonna go home, you're gonna go to bed, and wake up and do it again, and try to figure out a way to be better. So you're not gonna solve all your problems in a 24-hour span, right? And so just keep plugging away. And I think understanding that and really truly buying into that has helped me tremendously.
I love that. Really appreciate you sharing that, Coach. To wrap up, I give every guest what I kind of call a 60-second soapbox, but don't worry, I'm not going to time you. If you go over 60 seconds, that's perfectly fine. Just a catchy title I like to put to it. But it's your platform, Coach, to kind of get out a final message, a final thought, kind of a closing message that you want to leave the listeners with, and you're welcome to take it in any direction regarding any, basketball coaching related topic you want. I'm just going to kind of open up the floor to you, and I'm just going to kind of let you take it from here. So
Okay.
don't worry, no timer, Coach, but
Yeah.
the floor is
Well,
going to be yours.
as we talked about, I am a bit of a rambler, but I'll try to keep it short. I can't believe it's been an hour already.
Yeah, flies
That
by.
was quick. I think a couple things come to mind. I think the relationships that we have with players as coaches is something that we need to not take for granted. One of the things that we try to preach around here is, it's overused at times, but it is bigger than basketball. If you want to come in and talk about some things you got going on with your family, or if you want to talk about school, how, the transition's been hard, or, I mean, heck, if you want to come in here and talk about how good the lunch room food was, I mean, whatever you want to talk about, my door is always open. I'm here to help you as a person, not just as a basketball player. And we met because, you're on the team and I recruited you, or in this case, kind of was given some players that were already here, but it is not about what you can do for me. It's just about, how can I help you prepare for, whatever's next, whatever your tomorrow holds. And then the other thing is multi-sport athletes. I think that's becoming a lost art, because kids are wanting to specialize in a certain sport and get really good at whatever that is, which I can appreciate the work ethic, but I think as a former multi-sport athlete myself, I just think I remember going from football to basketball, and you'd have thought the first 2 weeks of basketball practice, I just sat on my butt for 4 months because I am so sore, right? It's just a different muscle group, and the same thing from basketball to track. I run the first couple track practices and I'm walking around like I got needles in my shoes and walking on eggshells. So I just think that, a lot of the injuries that we're seeing are from overuse. And I think that you can always fine tune your craft and stay in the gym and do all these different things. But whether it's actually playing another sport or training as if you're playing another sport, I think that's another way to kind of keep our bodies available. The best ability is availability. And we want to make sure that we're able to provide what our team needs for us at any given moment. And I just think that the whole multi-sport athlete idea is becoming less and less, and I would love to see more of that.
Hey, I will co-sign that 100 times, 1,000 times, a million times over. I think that I know personally that whole concept of specialization, I know is something that has me really worried, especially seeing some of those overuse injuries, or seeing people get way too specialized and not try out different sports at the younger level. So 100%. I will co-sign that. Coach, I really want to thank you. I know you're a busy guy. I really want to thank you for coming on and talking about really basketball at more of a conceptual level, and really getting into the more, I guess, philosophical side, for maybe a lack of a better term, and talking about the whys, and how we can teach the whys to our players, and even as coaches self-reflect on our own whys and about the way that we do things and why we do the things that we do. So I really appreciate you coming on, Coach Bullock, and sharing some of your insights and thoughts, and best of luck the rest of the way and in the future. You're doing great things where you're at, and I know you'll continue to do so. So thank you so much for coming on.
I can't tell you how much fun I had. It was a blast. I hope we can do it again sometime. It's one of those things that really enjoy what you've been able to do and the product you continue to put out. And hopefully I didn't ruin any reputation of your show by coming on here and giving my insight. So I had a great time. Look forward to seeing or hearing all the guests you have moving forward. And yeah, thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. And thank you so much, everyone, for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.